Man, what's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. If you guys didn't watch that last video I dropped, I'm pretty sure more people are going to watch this one. Man, we just hit 100,000 subscribers. That is so freaking crazy. It's unbelievable. I made a whole thank you video, so if you want to go back and watch that, I answered a lot of questions and things like that, and also showcase a lot of the phones that I own, pretty much like 90% of them. If you're interested in that, go watch that last video. But I figured I would do another special video today to kind of like redo a video that I actually started with in 2016. This was one of the first phones that I reviewed on this channel ever, and it was like my mom's old iPhone 5, and I was like, you know what, I have it laying around the house, might as well like snag it up and just review it real quick. And the iPhone 5 is one of those phones that is kind of close to me in a way, because I did own an iPhone 5 before I even owned a main phone as an iPhone. So the iPhone 6 Plus was my first iPhone that I ever used as a main phone, but the iPhone 5 I owned before that, which is kind of stupid and annoying. I don't know why I ever did that, but I really have a lot of feelings to it. I mean, I was about to get in a relationship with it. I asked it out, but it kind of declined me. I mean, it kind of went for like someone who looked a little bit better. So with all that being said, let's go ahead and take a look at the iPhone 5, see what's going on with it, seeing if it's still worth it. This sits at a really weird price tag because it's not cheap, but it's not expensive at the same time. But it's like expensive for what it is, but also not at the same time. It's really weird, but let's see if I can figure out that answer. Looking around the body, you can see that you've probably seen the iPhone at some point, and this is what the iPhone 5 looks like. It looks like every other iPhone. This also was released at a time where phones weren't really becoming huge. I mean, iPhones were pretty small at the time, and before iPhones started getting bigger and bigger, this was pretty much what every other phone was compared to. It was like either you have an iPhone or you have a bigger phone, and there was no in between, which is really crazy because now we have so many options. But in 2012, when this thing was released, there were phones like the Galaxies and some LGs that were much bigger than this. But at the same time, the iPhone 5 was pretty much up to par in speed with those phones in the beginning of its life cycle. You know, still pretty fast. I mean, even on iOS 10, which I have on it now, it's not completely slow. I mean, it's pretty slow, but when you factor in the age and everything, I mean, it's really not horrible. I mean, I could not bear using it on a daily device phone, but I'll get into that in terms of the performance later. But this phone still feels like a very premium phone. I really like the specific model that I have. The black one, it's like jet black or something. I don't even know what it's called. Or maybe it's the space gray one. This thing is sick. I love this design so much. They kind of did the same thing with the iPhone 7 Plus, the matte black one, I think. But the jet black iPhone 7 Plus, my favorite phone ever. We didn't have Touch ID on this, no fingerprint sensor, no dual cameras or anything like that. Very basic functions. We had the front camera, back camera, the lightning port. This was the first phone that brought the lightning port, which was pretty interesting because before we had that standard long USB one, whichever that one was called, the standard one, and then we switched over to lightning. And I remember when this phone was released, people were freaking out about this thing. They were like, man, Apple's going downhill, this and that. Kind of like how I over exaggerate in like all my videos. People were over exaggerating at that point. And you know what? That's one of the rare occasions where Apple was completely right and everyone else was pretty much wrong. Apple was so right into making that into a smaller port. Hopefully, you know, I'll be honest, I'm in the minority that like I hope that they don't switch to USB-C, because all my lightning ports that I have and all those like lightning chargers and USB accessories with lightning charger ports are going to go and be phased out. So I kind of hope they just wait a little bit longer for USB-C, but I totally understand why people want it. And that pretty much, you know, shows the outside of the phone. I mean, it still feels very premium. It doesn't feel cheap at all. And it's pretty much the most premium aspect of it, a 4-inch screen on the front. Believe it or not, it has the same pixels per inch as the iPhone XR, which is pretty, you know, incredible for the iPhone 5 and not so incredible for the iPhone XR. But you know what? That pretty much sums up the outer exterior of the phone. And now turning it on, we actually started with iOS 6 in the beginning with, but now you can actually upgrade it to iOS 10.3.3, which is still pretty outdated. We're talking 2 versions behind. Not quite. It's more like a year and a half behind in updates. And I'll tell you like this phone stopped at the best point ever, because this phone, and functionality wise and like specs wise, it's not that spec heavy. It has very basic specs, but the software that it's on is still fairly decent, you know, and I feel like that's very important. This is why software is so important, because if you look at the phone that was previous to this, I said that's so weird, the iPhone 4S, that actually ended up getting iOS 9.3.5, which was an extra year of support, and that just totally ruined that phone. I still own the iPhone 4S, and sometimes I pick it up, but every time I review it, I'm like, man, this phone is just a mess. Like, there's so many glitched frames. I mean, I don't even understand how people even used it back then. So that kind of leads us to that. And looking forward, I mean, looking at the iPhone 5S right now, that got an extra year of support too. And I feel like that's going to be at a pretty decent stopping point. I think iOS 12 is pretty decent on all the devices that it's on, unlike iOS 11. So Apple kind of did it justice by extending it a year. But with the iPhone 5, they stopped it at the perfect spot. And I think they're going to do that with the iPhone 5S as well. But the iPhone 5 is pretty decent on it, as fast as it could be. You know, it's not a fast phone. It's not blazing at any means, but it's probably the best that it could be for the specs that it has and the hardware that's inside of it. So that was a pretty long and winded way of leading into the specs inside. So it has the Apple A6 chip. a dual-core CPU, and 1 gig of RAM. And it's actually funny because the iPhone 6 pretty much has the same specs as this, but it has the Apple A8 chip. And like I say, I mean, this phone is fairly decent, okay? I would rate the performance when I don't even factor in the age or anything. I'd probably rate it like a 3 out of 10, you know, probably somewhere around there. And I could not even use this phone as a daily phone anymore. I would probably have to give it up in like 2 hours. But I totally understand why people would even think about getting this phone, or even people who just want to watch this video just to hear me complain about it. I'll say at a time it definitely brought a lot, you know, it definitely brought so many things, and at a time it was fast. But right now it just isn't really that fast, so if you're considering buying it, I would probably lure you away from it. But I'm sure people are watching this video who own this phone and can probably testify that performance isn't really that good, especially when you know what we have now. I mean, performance, multitasking, things like that just isn't that good, and gaming and everything isn't good either. I mean, it can play the basic games, you know, but surprisingly, even with like games like Paper.io, it like glitches here and there. But again, I don't want to knock this phone. Of course it's going to be slow. It's an older generation phone. I mean, it's many versions behind. I'm just surprised that this thing even got supported as long as it did. So I don't want to hate on it too much, and I'm not even hating on it. I mean, I love iPhones. I love the iPhone 5. It's just kind of seeing how it is now. And sometimes you got to be harsh on these things. I'll tell you like this, bro. The iPhone 5 is beautiful in and of itself, and I don't even need it. It doesn't need my opinion. It doesn't need me to justify if it's a good phone or if it's a bad phone. You know what I mean? The iPhone 5 is just beautiful as it is. Now switching to the camera, okay, we have an 8 megapixel camera on the back, and you can shoot 1080p videos on it. And I remember at a time, I don't remember when this was, but it was like after the iPhone 5 was released, obviously. Some of my friends, they got the iPhone 5, and literally I was so completely jealous. I was like, man, I was in high school, I think, or something, and these guys, they were like flexing so hard. They kept taking selfies, and I had like a Huawei, the U81001, whatever, the first Android phone I had. There's a video of it, and that didn't have a front camera. That thing barely had a back camera. And I was so jealous of it, man. I'll be completely honest. And people were always taking photos and everything. And I always look at the photos at that time and be like, this is crazy. This phone is amazing. And looking at the camera now, I mean, I kind of still feel the same way, but in a different way. So at the time I was like, this is the leading edge. This is the greatest thing ever. But now I'm like, this phone is like 7 years old or something, whatever it is now. And the camera is, you know, for a 7-year-old device, for a 7-year-old smartphone, it's not bad at all. If I'm being dead honest, it's pretty decent. Now, would I use it every day? Is it better than an iPhone 10 or 10R or whatever? No, it's not even close, but it can get the job done. And I think that in and of itself is a pretty big, you know, respectable thing for the iPhone 5. And it didn't necessarily bring too many crazy features, but I do think that the fact that it still kind of holds up is pretty interesting. And the front camera is 1.2 megapixels. It was basically used a lot for like FaceTiming and stuff. And they actually kept these same camera modules. I'm sure they upgraded a lot of the internals or whatever, but the same camera megapixel count from the iPhone 5 to the 5S and the iPhone 6. They upgraded with the iPhone 6S, but still kind of crazy that happened. Now moving on to the battery life. This is one thing that probably sucks on all the iPhone 5s, and at a 1440 mAh battery. And you have to remember that batteries do degrade over time, so it's not that 1440 mAh anymore. It's probably like 800 or 900 or whatever. I mean, this phone is almost 7 years old, so the battery's probably degraded a lot more than you think. Now, Apple did do a battery replacement program, but the iPhone 5 was not supported in it. The iPhone 5S wasn't even supported in it either. But I'll tell you, man, the battery life, if you kept it 100% stock and it was like 100% full, it's not horrible. I mean, if I had to use it, I probably could get it through a day, but that's mostly because I wouldn't be using this phone too much because it just can't handle the tasks that I do. I mean, the 1 gig of RAM isn't completely horrible on the iPhone 5, but it has a lot to do with just the chipset. I think that's probably the main thing. I mean, if it had the Apple A8 chip or A9 chip, I'm sure it'd be better. Even the A7 chip. But I don't think the Apple A6 chip was as good as it could be in my opinion. But as far as it goes with the battery life, I think it's not bad. For as old as this device is, I definitely have to respect I definitely have respect for what it is. Now, some other notable things to note, this thing still has the headphone jack, which is one extra port more than the latest iPhone XS and XS Max have, so that's pretty interesting. You also don't have Touch ID, which might suck for a lot of people. You also don't have any IP certification or anything, so that's also one thing you have to kind of keep in mind. And I just still find it interesting that the 2012 flagship of Apple was still supported up until I think like 2016 or whenever that was. I think even 2017. I totally forget when this phone was stopped supported, but it's a pretty crazy device. And you know what? Is this iPhone 5 still worth it in 2019? For you to use it as your daily phone, I probably wouldn't recommend it. It is pretty slow, and I don't want to be too harsh on it, but it is slow, and gaming isn't perfect, and there's a lot of other inconsistencies with this phone. But I don't want to say this phone is horrible. This phone is amazing for what it brought. Brought the lightning port connector, a bigger size. I think it was probably one of the best built iPhones. I think the iPhone 4 was probably the best looking or whatever, but I also think the iPhone 5 was the best looking and the best built. So it's kind of weird how these things all kind of fold into each other. But I'll definitely say that to buy the iPhone 5 as a collector's item or a side phone or something isn't a horrible option, but if you want to use it as your main phone, I would definitely stay away from it. At least go up to like an iPhone 5S. At least that thing is still supported. But if you have even like $50 more to spend, I mean, I've seen a lot of these for like $50. I would just go spend an extra like $50 to $100, get an iPhone 6S. You still save tons of money and you can still get a ton of life left out of the 6S. So that's pretty much where I'm going to end it off at, man. If you guys have any questions or anything like that, leave it down in the comment section below, bro. Hit that like button, that'll mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. Like I said, man, I want to thank you guys so much for that 100,000 mark. That's crazy. I'm finally verified too, which is awesome. I will be doing a giveaway very, very soon, probably within a week. I mean, I'm probably going to give away more iPhones this time than the last time, so kind of have to formulate that giveaway, see if I can get any sponsors, all that good stuff. So keep a look down on the channel. Hopefully I'll do that very sooner than later, hopefully. But definitely check out the links in the description as well. My Twitter, my Instagram, my second channel, all those links are linked down below. I'd really appreciate if you guys could check that out too. But more importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.